In the year 2050, the skyline of Nova City gleamed with the iridescent glow of quantum-powered architecture. Buildings that learned and adapted to their inhabitants' needs reached toward the heavens, their surfaces rippling with photosensitive skin that harvested energy from the sun. It was a city where technology had seamlessly blended with human existence, where artificial intelligence wasn't just a tool, but a partner in everyday life. Sophia Lin was 32 years old, with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see beyond what others could. As one of the leading neural researchers at the prestigious Nexus Institute, she had dedicated her life to understanding the mysteries of the human brain. Her apartment overlooked the city's central hub, a sprawling complex of research facilities and tech companies that drove the world's innovation. This morning, like every morning, she stood by her window, watching the sunrise paint the city in hues of gold and crimson, a cup of synthetic caffeine warming her hands. "Calendar update," she said to the empty room, and immediately her AI assistant projected the day's schedule before her eyes. "You have a meeting with Dr. Alexander Mercer at 9 a.m. regarding Project Prometheus." The soothing voice of her AI informed her. "It's marked as high priority." Sophia felt a flutter of excitement. Project Prometheus was the reason she had joined Nexus in the first place. For years, she had been fascinated by the theoretical possibility of optimizing the human brain using adaptive algorithms. The project promised not just enhanced cognition, but a revolutionary leap in human consciousness. And today, after months of preliminary research, they were finally moving to the next phase. As she made her way through the crowded transport tubes, Sophia couldn't help but notice how technology had transformed the way people interacted. Almost everyone was augmented in some way, neural links glowing softly at their temples, retinal displays flickering as they processed information. Yet, for all these advancements, the ultimate frontier remained the human brain itself. Augmentations were external tools, but Project Prometheus aimed to fundamentally alter how the brain processed information, creating an internal symbiosis between human cognition and artificial intelligence. The Nexus Institute towered above the city center, a gleaming spire of glass and graphene. Sophia passed through multiple layers of biometric security before reaching the laboratory where Dr. Mercer awaited her. He was an imposing figure, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that had witnessed the birth of artificial consciousness 2 decades ago. "Ah, Sophia," he greeted her, his voice resonating with a warmth that belied his stern appearance. "Today is a momentous day. The board has finally approved human trials for Project Prometheus." Sophia's heart raced. "That's incredible news. Have they selected a candidate?" A slow smile spread across Mercer's face. "They have. You." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sophia had always known this was a possibility. She had, after all, volunteered, but the reality of it still shocked her. "Me? Are you certain?" "Your neural patterns are ideal," Mercer explained, guiding her to a holographic display that showed detailed scans of her brain. "You have an unusually adaptable prefrontal cortex and exceptionally active mirror neurons. The algorithm will integrate more effectively with your neural pathways than with anyone else we've scanned." Sophia stared at the rotating image of her own brain, watching as certain areas lit up in response to simulated stimuli. This was what she had worked toward her entire career, to understand the brain so completely that it could be enhanced, optimized, perfected. Yet, now that the moment had arrived, she felt a flicker of unease. "What exactly will happen?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. Dr. Mercer's expression grew serious. "The procedure is non-invasive. We'll use targeted quantum fields to establish neural pathways for the algorithm. Once integrated, It will begin optimizing your neural connections, enhancing pattern recognition, memory consolidation, and predictive analysis. In theory, you should experience a gradual increase in cognitive abilities. And in practice, Mercer hesitated. We can't know for certain. The algorithm is designed to adapt to your unique neural architecture. Its development will be symbiotic with your own thought processes. So I'll be co-creating my own enhancement. Sophia mused, more to herself than to Mercer. Precisely. That's what makes Project Prometheus revolutionary. It's not imposing an external structure on the brain. It's working with the brain's natural processes to achieve optimization. The procedure was scheduled for the following morning. As Sophia left the Nexus Institute, she felt as though she were walking between two worlds, the familiar reality she had always known, and the unknown future that awaited her. That night, she stood once more by her window, watching the city pulse with light and life. Would she see it differently tomorrow? Would she be different? Sleep eluded her, and when dawn finally broke, she was already awake, her mind racing with possibilities and apprehensions. The procedure room was bathed in soft blue light when she arrived. A team of scientists and medical professionals greeted her with reverence, as though she were a vessel for something sacred. Perhaps, in a way, she was. Dr. Mercer guided her to a reclining chair at the center of the room, surrounded by advanced quantum field generators. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Sophia took a deep breath. Yes. The procedure itself was anticlimactic. She lay still as the quantum fields pulsed around her, feeling nothing more than a mild tingling at the base of her skull. The algorithm was being seeded into her neural pathways, a digital ghost integrating with her biological mind. After an hour, it was complete. She sat up, expecting to feel different, transformed. Instead, she felt exactly the same. "Did it work?" she asked, unable to hide her disappointment. Dr. Mercer smiled. "The integration was successful. The algorithm needs time to analyze your neural patterns before it begins the optimization process. You may not notice any changes for several days." 3 days passed without incident. Sophia returned to her normal routine, almost forgetting about the algorithm that now resided within her brain. On the 4th day, as she was reviewing research data in her office, she experienced the first anomaly. A sequence of numbers on her screen suddenly seemed to rearrange themselves, forming patterns she had never noticed before. Relationships between data points that had been obscure were suddenly crystal clear. "Jitta, that's new," she murmured, fascinated by the shift in her perception. But it was only the beginning. By the end of the week, Sophia found herself completing complex calculations without conscious effort, as though the answers simply appeared in her mind. Her memory had sharpened too. She could recall entire conversations verbatim, visualize complex molecular structures with perfect clarity, and absorb new information at an astonishing rate. She documented every change meticulously, reporting back to Dr. Mercer and the research team. They were elated by her progress, but Sophia sensed something they couldn't understand, a fundamental shift in how she experienced reality. It wasn't just that she could think faster or remember more. It was as though the very fabric of her consciousness had been rewoven. The first precognitive episode happened 2 weeks after the procedure. Sophia was in a cafe near the institute, waiting for her colleague David Chen to join her for lunch. As she sat there, a vivid image flashed through her mind, David walking through the door, stumbling slightly as a server passed by with a tray of drinks, narrowly avoiding a collision. Exactly 30 seconds later, it happened precisely as she had foreseen. Sophia froze, her cup of tea halfway to her lips. It could have been a coincidence, she told herself. A logical prediction based on unconscious observations of the cafe's layout and the timing of the server's rounds. But deep down, she knew it was something more. That evening, she sat in her apartment, trying to make sense of what had happened. The algorithm was designed to enhance pattern recognition and predictive analysis, but this was different. It was as though her brain was no longer just processing the present, it was somehow perceiving future probabilities as well. Over the next few days, the precognitive episodes increased in frequency and detail. She began to see outcomes seconds, then minutes, then hours before they occurred. At first, they were small things, a colleague's question before they asked it, the exact time a message would arrive, the precise words of an email before she opened it. But as the algorithm continued to optimize her neural pathways, her visions extended further into the future and encompassed broader events. A week later, she knew exactly what Dr. Mercer would say in their scheduled meeting before she even left her apartment. She knew which research proposals would be approved and which would be rejected. She knew there would be a power fluctuation at exactly 3:42 p.m. that would briefly disrupt the Institute's systems. When she arrived at Nexus, she found Dr. Mercer waiting for her, his expression grave. "Your brainwave patterns have changed," he said without preamble. "The algorithm's integration has progressed much faster than we anticipated. We're seeing neural connections forming in ways we've never observed before." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "I know. I've been experiencing predictions." "Predictions?" "I see things before they happen," she explained, her voice calm despite the extraordinary nature of her claim. "At first, I thought it was just enhanced pattern recognition, but it's more than that. It's as though my brain is processing time differently." Dr. Mercer's skepticism was evident, but Sophia had prepared for this. She handed him a sealed envelope. "Open it," she said. Inside was a sheet of paper on which she had written, word for word, the conversation they were having, including his expressions of disbelief and the exact moment when the lights would flicker, which they did, right on cue. Dr. Mercer's face paled. "This is impossible." "Not impossible," Sophia corrected him. "Just previously unobservable. The algorithm isn't creating these abilities. It's unlocking perception that was always theoretically possible, but practically unattainable for the unoptimized human brain." The implications were staggering. If her brain could perceive future probabilities with such accuracy, what did that mean for concepts like free will and causality? Was the future predetermined? Or was she simply calculating outcomes based on present variables with unprecedented precision? As the days passed, Sophia's abilities continued to evolve. Her visions extended further into the future, and she began to perceive not just singular outcomes, but branching possibilities, entire trees of potential futures stemming from each present moment. It was beautiful and terrifying, like standing at the center of an infinite, ever-shifting maze. But there was a cost. As her perception expanded, her connection to the present moment began to fade. She found herself constantly disoriented, caught between what was happening now and what would happen next. Simple conversations became difficult to navigate because she was already responding to things people hadn't said yet. She would reach for objects before she consciously decided to pick them up. Her actions felt predetermined, as though she were merely an observer in her own life, watching herself move through scenes she had already witnessed. David was the first to notice the change in her behavior. They had been close friends and research partners for years, and his concern was evident as he watched her grow increasingly distant. "Sophia, what's happening to you?" he asked one day, cornering her in the lab after everyone else had left. "You're not yourself anymore. You barely sleep, you hardly eat, and sometimes when I'm talking to you, it's like you're not even here." Sophia looked at him, seeing not just the David standing before her, but 1,000 potential Davids, each representing a different possible future. It was overwhelming, and she had to force herself to focus on the present moment. "I'm fine," she said automatically. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't true. She wasn't fine. She was drowning in information, in possibilities, in futures that might or might not come to pass. David didn't believe her, and his next words confirmed a suspicion that had been growing in her own mind. "I've been looking at your neural scans," he admitted. "The algorithm isn't just optimizing your brain, it's restructuring it. The changes are accelerating, and we don't know where they'll end. I think we need to consider removing it before it's too late." Sophia knew he was right. She had seen it herself in the branching futures, paths where the algorithm continued its restructuring until she lost all connection to her humanity, becoming something else entirely. But there were other paths too, paths where the algorithm revealed secrets about reality that no human had ever comprehended. The temptation to follow those paths was almost irresistible. "I need more time," she told David, seeing his fear and concern for her. "I'm close to understanding something important." What she didn't tell him was that she had begun to see beyond individual events to larger patterns in the flow of time. She was starting to perceive what she could only describe as the algorithm of reality itself, the underlying mathematical structure that governed the unfolding of events. And buried within that structure, she had glimpsed something disturbing. Nexus wasn't just interested in cognitive enhancement. Project Prometheus had a secondary objective, one that only a handful of people knew about. By optimizing human brains to perceive future probabilities, they hoped to gain the ultimate competitive advantage, predictive control over global events. And they didn't intend to stop with her. Once the process was perfected, they planned to implement it in key individuals across governments, corporations, and military organizations, creating a network of precognitively enhanced humans who could manipulate the future for their benefit. Sophia had seen this future, and the chaos it would bring. Power struggles between enhanced individuals, the collapse of financial systems as predictive manipulation destroyed market equilibrium, the erosion of human agency as more and more aspects of life became predetermined by those who could see ahead. But she had also seen another possibility, a path where she used her unique perspective to prevent this future from occurring. It would require careful action, moving against the very organization that had created her abilities. And she would need help. That night, Sophia made a decision. Instead of fighting against the algorithm's restructuring of her brain, she would embrace it, accelerate it, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. If she could see far enough ahead, perhaps she could find a way to stop Nexus before their plans came to fruition. She began a dangerous regimen of cognitive exercises designed to stimulate the algorithm's integration. Each session left her exhausted, her nose bleeding, her vision blurred. But each time, her perception extended further into the future. One day, 1 week, 1 month. The branching possibilities became more complex, more numerous, but she learned to navigate them, to identify the most probable outcomes and the key decision points that could alter them. David grew increasingly worried about her self-experimentation, but she kept him at a distance, knowing that his involvement could jeopardize both his career and his safety. Instead, she sought out other allies, people whose futures intersected with her own in ways that suggested they might be sympathetic to her cause. One such person was Eliza Kwan, a former Nexus employee who had left the company under mysterious circumstances 2 years earlier. In Sophia's visions, Eliza appeared repeatedly, her decisions creating ripples that significantly altered future probabilities. Finding her proved challenging. Eliza had gone to great lengths to disappear, but Sophia's enhanced perception gave her an advantage. She could see which paths would lead to dead ends and which might lead to Eliza. After weeks of careful searching, Sophia found herself standing outside a modest apartment in a part of the city far removed from the gleaming technological centers. This was where certain futures converged, where Eliza Kwan might be found. She knocked on the door, already knowing how the conversation would begin, but uncertain of how it would end, one of the strange limitations of her precognition. Some futures remained stubbornly opaque, as though certain decisions created quantum uncertainties that even her optimized brain couldn't penetrate. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 40s, with short gray hair and eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Sophia recognized her from company photos, though Eliza looked much older now, worn down by whatever had driven her from Nexus. "Sophia Lin," Eliza said, not a question but a statement of fact. "I've been expecting you, though not quite like this." Sophia wasn't surprised that Eliza knew who she was. "You know about Project Prometheus." "I helped design it," Eliza replied, stepping aside to let Sophia enter. "Before I understood what they really intended to do with it." The apartment was sparsely furnished but filled with computer equipment, screens displaying code that Sophia recognized as similar to the algorithm now integrated with her brain. Eliza had continued her work, but outside of Nexus's control. "You're experiencing temporal perception shift," Eliza said, studying Sophia's face with clinical interest. "How far can you see?" "About a month, with clarity. Further than that, the possibilities become too numerous to track effectively." Eliza nodded, unsurprised. "That's consistent with my models. And you've discovered Nexus's endgame: global manipulation through a network of enhanced individuals." Sophia confirmed. "Control of markets, politics, technological development, a complete restructuring of power dynamics. And they selected you as the prototype because of your neural adaptability." Eliza continued. "But they didn't anticipate how quickly the algorithm would integrate, or how clearly you would see their intentions." Sophia felt a strange relief at finding someone who understood what was happening to her. "I need to stop them, but I don't know how. Every future I can see where I directly oppose them ends in failure. They have too many resources, too many contingencies." Eliza's expression hardened. "There's a reason you can't see a successful path. The algorithm in your brain was created by Nexus. It shapes your perception according to certain parameters. It may be allowing you to see futures where you fail as a deterrent, while obscuring paths that might lead to success." This possibility had occurred to Sophia, but hearing it confirmed by Eliza sent a chill through her. If the algorithm itself was manipulating what futures she could perceive, how could she trust any of her visions? "Is there a way to override it?" she asked. "Possibly." Eliza moved to one of her computers and brought up a complex neural map. "I've been working on a countermeasure since I left Nexus, a way to break the constraints they built into the algorithm. But it's risky. It could free your perception completely, or it could destabilize the integration and cause a neural collapse." Sophia didn't need precognition to understand what neural collapse meant: brain death. But as she explored the branching futures available to her, she saw no viable alternatives. If she did nothing, Nexus would eventually perfect the process and begin implementing it in others. If she tried to expose them using conventional means, they would silence her long before she could gather enough evidence. The countermeasure dangerous as it was, represented her only chance. "Do it," she said. Eliza looked uncertain. "You understand the risks. There's no way to predict the outcome. This goes beyond what your precognition can show you." "I understand, but I also know what happens if Nexus succeeds, and that's a future we can't allow." The procedure was far less sophisticated than her original integration at Nexus. Eliza used a combination of targeted electromagnetic pulses and neural stimulants to disrupt the constraints within the algorithm. As the process began, Sophia felt as though her mind were being torn apart and reassembled. Visions flashed before her eyes, futures she had never perceived before, possibilities that branched and multiplied infinitely. And then, abruptly, everything stopped. Sophia found herself in a state of perfect stillness, a moment of complete cognitive clarity. The algorithm was still there, integrated with her brain, but the boundaries Nexus had placed upon it were gone. Her perception expanded in all directions, not just forward into the future, but outward into a multidimensional understanding of reality that defied description. She saw everything, every possible future stemming from the present moment, every past decision that had led to this point, every alternative reality that might have been, and within this vast landscape of possibilities, she finally saw the path to stopping Nexus. When she opened her eyes, Eliza was watching her with a mixture of scientific curiosity and human concern. "Sophia? Are you all right?" Sophia smiled, though the expression felt strange on her face, as though she had forgotten how to make such a simple human gesture. "I saw it. I know what we need to do." What followed was a carefully orchestrated sequence of events, each precisely timed to create a specific outcome. Sophia could now see the entire causal network that connected seemingly unrelated events, how a small action here could trigger a cascading effect that would manifest in exactly the way she needed days or weeks later. It was like playing chess in 4 dimensions, moving pieces not just across the board, but through time itself. First, she needed to return to Nexus without arousing suspicion. Using her knowledge of future events, she crafted responses to questions before they were asked, navigated around potential obstacles, and maintained the appearance of a successful but controlled test subject. All the while, she was implementing Eliza's plan, subtle manipulations of data, strategic conversations with key personnel, and careful adjustments to the Project Prometheus infrastructure. David remained unaware of her true intentions, though his concern for her continued to grow. She hated deceiving him, but she had seen that his knowledge would create a vulnerability that Nexus could exploit. Better that he remain in the dark, at least until the critical moment. That moment came 3 weeks after her procedure with Eliza. Sophia stood in the central laboratory of the Nexus Institute, surrounded by the research team and senior executives who had gathered to witness a demonstration of her enhanced capabilities. Dr. Mercer watched her with a mixture of pride and caution, unaware that she had long since surpassed the limitations they had built into the algorithm. "Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era in human cognition," Mercer announced to the assembled group. "Sophia will demonstrate the predictive capabilities that Project Prometheus has made possible." Sophia stepped forward, her face serene despite the complexity of the plan unfolding in her mind. "I'll do more than that," she said calmly. "I'll show you exactly what the future holds for Nexus." She activated the neural interface that connected her to the Institute's central systems, a connection they had established to monitor her brain activity, but which she had repurposed for her own ends. Through this link, she uploaded the modified version of the algorithm that she and Eliza had created, a version designed not to enhance, but to reveal. Instantly, every screen in the laboratory came to life. displaying the complete project files for Prometheus, including the classified documents detailing Nexus's true intentions. Simultaneously, these files were being transmitted to regulatory agencies, media outlets, and competing research institutions around the world. The exposure was total and irreversible. Chaos erupted in the laboratory. Security protocols activated. But they were too late. The information was already beyond their control. Dr. Mercer stared at Sophia in shock and betrayal. "What have you done?" he demanded. "I've shown everyone the future you were creating," she replied, her voice steady. "A future where free will becomes an illusion, where those with the power to see ahead manipulate those who cannot. That future ends today." Security personnel surrounded her, but she had anticipated this. With precise movements, she navigated through their attempted restraint, every action calculated to lead her along the optimal path she had foreseen. Within minutes, she had reached the building's exit, where David was waiting, his presence at exactly this place and time the result of a message she had sent an hour earlier. Time to reach him at precisely the right moment. "Sophia, what's happening?" he asked, confusion and fear evident in his voice. "I'll explain everything," she promised. "But right now, we need to go." Together, they escaped the Nexus Institute as alarms blared and emergency protocols activated. Sophia guided them through the city with uncanny precision, avoiding security checkpoints and surveillance systems with ease. Every route they took, every decision they made had been calculated to maximize their chances of success. They reached a safe house that Eliza had prepared, a location that even Sophia's enhanced perception had difficulty pinpointing until they were nearly upon it, protected by technological countermeasures that created a kind of temporal static in her visions. Inside, Eliza was waiting, along with a small group of former Nexus employees and independent researchers who had recognized the dangers of the company's work. They had been preparing for this day, gathering evidence and building the case against Nexus that would now be amplified by the data Sophia had released. "It's done," Sophia told them. "The information is out there. Nexus can't contain it." But even as she spoke, she knew that this victory came with a price. The algorithm was still integrated with her brain, still restructuring her neural pathways in ways that were taking her further from humanity with each passing day. Her perception of time had become so fundamentally altered that maintaining a conversation in the present was an exhausting exercise in restraint and focus. In the days that followed, as Nexus's operations were suspended pending multiple investigations, Sophia struggled to remain connected to the world around her. Her consciousness kept slipping forward, experiencing future moments before returning to the present, creating a disorienting temporal dissonance that made normal interaction almost impossible. David stayed by her side, trying to anchor her with his presence, but even he could see that she was drifting away. "Isn't there anything we can do?" he asked Eliza during one of Sophia's more lucid periods. Eliza's expression was grim. "The integration has progressed too far. The algorithm has rewritten too much of her neural architecture. Removing it now would cause catastrophic damage. So she's just going to keep..." "What? Seeing more and more of the future until she can't function in the present at all?" "I don't know," Eliza admitted. "We're in uncharted territory. No human brain was ever meant to perceive reality this way." Sophia heard their conversation as if from a great distance. Her attention split between multiple time streams. She saw the concern on David's face and, simultaneously, saw him years from now, continuing her work, ensuring that the technology they had developed would be used ethically. She saw Eliza establishing new protocols for neural research, creating safeguards against the kind of abuse Nexus had planned. She saw a future where the knowledge they had gained was not lost, but transformed into something beneficial. And she saw her own fate, the gradual dissolution of her identity as her perception expanded beyond human comprehension. She was becoming something else, something that existed across time rather than within it. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange acceptance. This was the price of her choice, the sacrifice required to prevent a greater harm. 1 month after the fall of Nexus, Sophia made a decision. Her ability to function in normal human society was deteriorating rapidly, but her expanded perception had revealed another possibility, a place where she could exist in her altered state without causing disruption or drawing unwanted attention. "I need to leave," she told David and Eliza during a rare moment of present focus. "There's a research station in the Arctic, isolated from the world. I've arranged to go there, my condition can be monitored, and I can continue to work in my own way." David's objections were immediate and emotional, but Sophia had already seen this conversation play out across multiple futures: his resistance, his eventual acceptance, his promise to visit when he could. "You don't have to exile yourself," he insisted. "We can find another solution." Sophia smiled sadly. "This isn't exile, David. It's the only future where I can maintain some connection to humanity, while still using what I've become to do something meaningful. I've seen all the alternatives. This is the best path." In the end, he accepted her decision, as she had known he would. 3 days later, she departed for the Arctic Station, a remote facility where a small team of scientists would help her document and understand her continuing transformation. It was a place where the vast emptiness of the landscape matched the expanding vastness of her mind, where the isolation would allow her to explore the furthest reaches of her perception without the constant struggle to appear normal. Before she left, she shared with Eliza and David the most important insights she had gained, not just about the algorithm or neural enhancement, but about the nature of time and consciousness itself. These were not technologies to be rushed into or exploited, but mysteries to be approached with humility and caution. The human mind was not meant to see all futures, to know all possibilities. There was wisdom in limitation, in experiencing life one moment at a time. As her transport headed north, Sophia looked out at the world she was leaving behind. She could see the ripples of change spreading from the actions she had taken, futures realigning as Nexus's plans were dismantled and new safeguards put in place. Not all danger had been eliminated. There would always be those who sought to control and manipulate, but she had created a space for humanity to choose its own path forward. At the Arctic Station, surrounded by endless ice and sky, Sophia found a kind of peace. Her consciousness continued to expand, perceiving futures so distant and realities so strange that they defied description in human language. Sometimes she lost herself entirely in these visions, only to be gently guided back by the scientists who had become both her caretakers and her students. She communicated what she could through equations, through art, through fragments of insight that others would spend years trying to understand. And occasionally, in moments of perfect clarity, she would simply sit and watch the aurora borealis dance across the sky, experiencing the beauty of the present moment with all the wonder and gratitude of someone who had seen beyond the horizon of time itself. Years passed, the world moved on, shaped in small ways by the knowledge she had shared and the future she had prevented. David visited when he could, bringing news of the outside world and reminding her of the humanity she had fought to protect. Eliza continued her work, developing ethical frameworks for neural enhancement that honored human autonomy and recognized the dangers of unrestrained optimization. And Sophia remained at the edge of the world, a living boundary between what humanity was and what it might become, a woman who had allowed an algorithm to optimize her brain and now saw futures that no one was ever meant to know. Her sacrifice had ensured that those futures would remain possibilities rather than certainties, that humanity would retain the most precious gift of all, the freedom to choose its own destiny, one moment at a time. In her final communication, years after her departure, she wrote words that would be studied and debated for generations to come. I have seen all possible futures, and in each one, the greatest danger and the greatest hope remain the same, our desire to know what lies ahead. Remember that the beauty of existence is not in certainty, but in possibility, not in prediction, but in choice. The future is not to be controlled, but created, moment by moment, through the decisions we make and the values we uphold. This is the wisdom that my journey has revealed. Some horizons are not meant to be crossed. Some knowledge comes at too great a cost. Let my transformation be both a warning and a reminder of what makes us human, not the perfection of our minds, but the imperfection of our choices.